Hello, everyone. John Adkison again here doing another interview for the docu-series called Circumcision Harms. And I have Kristin with me here. Kristin, please introduce yourself and tell us how you got here.
Hi, my name is Kristin. I guess it really started when I was pregnant, and before I even found out the gender, me and my baby's father discussed circumcision, and right off the bat, it was kind of like, I don't really think so, for both of us, just because when you think about it, it's a strange practice. But then we researched,
Mhm.
just because anytime there's something going on with your child, you want to make the best informed decision, just making sure that it was the right decision. And I was horrified um, when I found out everything that was involved with the procedure, and how foreskin can be beneficial and the things that can go wrong with circumcision. After that, I found some Facebook groups, and then I was like, I realized I wasn't alone in thinking that circumcision was crazy. And
Yeah,
then
I was
after a
worried the same.
while,
I was worried too when I started learning about this.
yeah, like this can't be normal. The rest of the world can't be on board with this. And
Yeah,
it turns out they aren't.
yeah.
Um, but then I got involved with Your Whole Baby. I was posting on the Instagram page for, I think, 2.5 years. I
Mhm.
managed that page.
Oh, sweet.
Um, but I recently stopped just because I couldn't take like the emotional burden anymore. It just got really heavy.
Yeah, burnout for activists or general autonomy advocates is a real thing, and that's part of what we'll cover here as we go over the harms. So,
Right.
yeah. Anything else?
I don't think so. I think that's
Okay.
pretty much what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. You said the things that could go wrong. There's one thing that goes wrong 100% of the time. The boy loses his prepuce or his foreskin, right?
Right.
So, and there's a lot wrong with that. So. So I have an outline of things I try to cover during each of these interviews. I'll give you the main highlights here. There's the physical attributes of the harm. You know, what's removed, what's physically removed, and how that affects things by the fact that it's not there anymore. And then how that affects sexual partnership activities, right?
Right.
And then how all that attributes to psychological effects, not just of the person that's been cut, but and the person that they're being sexual with, but also medical professionals, children, um, people that haven't been cut and aren't even directly affected at all. It goes all the way around. And then I'll talk. We'll cover relationships, how the fact that ritual genital cutting going on in the world affects relationships between people. And then we'll jump into FGM and maybe intersex um, normalization surgeries and how this is all interconnected. All these genital cutting rituals that we do in this world. And then last but not least, how this all affects social productivity in the world. Okay. So you're seasoned in activist, so a lot of this I'm sure you're gonna understand, but um, I'm gonna present this stuff and maybe it'll get your juices flowing in your head a little bit and you will probably have
Okay.
something that you want to say about it or whatever. And as I go through each piece, I'll pause and if you have something, go ahead and chime in. If you don't, I'll just go on to the next thing. Okay. So don't feel
Okay.
like you have to um, putting anything into this. There's
Okay.
parts that might not apply to you, or you don't have any personal experience about.
Okay.
Okay. So I have my mock penis here made out of yarn. It's not a dildo, so hopefully YouTube won't get mad at me about using this sort of dildo. I have one known intactivist that does YouTube videos, and she got in trouble for showing a dildo. Yeah. So, but unfortunately, YouTube is still, the most popular video site there is. So here we go. So, a normal penis would have its foreskin, right? It's prepuce. I'm going to explain a little bit more about the word foreskin and why I use quotes around it. But John Geishiker did a presentation for me at a Your Whole Baby. We had a Your Whole Baby booth at this baby fair in Bellevue, Washington, and I talked him into doing a presentation. He's in Seattle anyway, so it was really easy for him. And one of the things he talked about was the acropostion. And he was sharing an image of a Greek statue with, I'm pretty sure it was Greek, with an intact male. And at the end of the intact male's penis was this, part that hung over probably about a centimeter past the glands. You could just see that, it was an intact penis. You didn't see the mushroom head. You didn't see the glands being exposed. You just saw, a full, whole, normal penis. And that part that hangs past the glands is referred to as the acropostion. And from what I understand, in earlier biblical times, that's all that they cut off. That's all they removed. Somewhere like 100 something AD, the rabbis got word that some of the Jewish men that were playing games with the Romans, and they would do so in the nude, would do things to try to restore their foreskin more, so their glands was fully covered, because it was thought of as bad to have your glands, hanging out there. Really, your glands is only supposed to be hanging out there when you're, turned on. So, so nowadays, everything is removed. The entire prepuce is laying bare the glands, according to Jewish writings. And also referred to, instead of brit milah, brit priah. And then this skin, some people think of it as just a flap of extra skin. It's just extra skin, right? And it's a flap. Well, your eyelids are, you can call them a flap of skin. But it's proven through science. Don't know why we need to have science to prove this, but it's innervated and it's vascularized, and very much so. And the Sorrells study and even the Basio study prove that there's nerves in there. It's very sensitive to light touch and it's sensitive to heat, right? And then even the AAP said this themselves, and I'm pretty sure it was 1971, that is there to protect the glands, right? And back then, the very first AAP statement on this was just a one-liner. That's all they've already said. And from what I can see, it's still true. It's there to protect the glands, keep it moist and smooth and all that, which is the next steps I get into. But here's the thing. It's definitely not, it's not even a flap of skin like your eyelid, because it's a double fold.
Right.
People think of, they call it turtlenecks. Well, actually, I think that's the best representation of it. Other people say anteaters and all that, but I think the turtleneck is a better explanation, because when you see a turtle, it sticks its head out, and when it goes back in, that all the tissue folds up around its head. And just imagine removing that skin from that turtle's head. That would be horrible, right?
The turtle wouldn't be able to put its head back in its shell.
Yeah, or extend it out. It wouldn't be able to move it like it's supposed to. And the penis is a very mobile body part. I mean, it shrinks like especially when it's cold, it really shrinks in, right? And when it gets engorged, it really extends out a lot. I mean, there's a huge movement there, right? And so there's a rolling mechanism that, just like the turtle's neck skin on the penis, as you can tell, that unfolded down there. It wasn't just a flap of skin that slid down off of the,
right.
that would kind of be weird.
Flap is just such a weird, inaccurate term, because when you think of a flap, you don't think that it has mobility. You think that it's like one-sided that just like flaps.
Yeah,
And
it's
that
not.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So that rolling mechanism provides a lot of benefits, some function. One of those functions, this varies from one man to another, but some men have, even after they're erect, they still have a certain amount of coverage. And if they do have coverage, or even when they don't, they still have some mobility. But when they are having sex and they're penetrating or whatever, you can watch my fingers don't slide; they don't move as the penis extends out, right? So
Right.
the penis went that far into whatever, the vagina, the anus, or whatever, without any sliding, without any friction. And that might be important in cases where there's not a whole lot of lubrication. And also, on top of that, there's moisture and lubrication that happens in there, because it's not even just skin. It's like, again, it's like calling your eyelids or your cheeks just skin. It's complicated. It's got an intermucosal layer and the outside layer and the ridge band and frenulum, much like there's comparable parts to the mouth, right?
Right.
So that moisture, that lubrication, brings lubrication to sexual activity. They're not completely dependent on the female becoming, completely wet down there, right? Sometimes I'll tell you my own personal experience has been a couple of my partners actually ended up getting torn because we got too excited, too rushed, or whatever, and because I didn't have anything myself, and we didn't reach over to grab the KY jelly or whatever, we end up getting torn.
Right. And I think that most people don't realize like the amount of moisture that someone would have to have on their vagina. Like even if the entrance is completely wet, that only accounts for so much of whatever is entering.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can only moisturize so much. It doesn't like I don't think people seem to like sit down and like think like
Yeah.
like maybe women don't need lube, maybe like there's something else wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've heard of women that they felt bad, they felt like it was their fault, whatever, for things not going well, and then they learn about this and they're like, oh, it's not necessarily all my fault.
Right.
It's the fact that they're missing something, the male is missing something.
I think it puts a lot of pressure on men too. Like they think that they have to like get her wet when like it's like yes, there should be like adequate foreplay and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
the whole thing shouldn't be dependent on how much moisture the female is able to like scrounge up.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a strange. It's clearly not like how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And I don't imagine women want to tell their man, well, slow down or whatever, because they're kind of excited that their partner is excited.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm not ready yet. You don't want to hurt the guy's ego, right? Or
Yeah.
you don't want to. He might get impatient or whatever. That's not good either. That's not fun for sex. So
Yeah. It just causes a lot of tension.
Mm-hmm. All the way around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then there's a part that gets hurt one way or another, but to varying degrees. And that's this isn't a perfect display of it, but there's the part right underneath the bottom part of the penis, right below the glands, and you got to see a little line here. and that's the frenulum. And much like the frenulum underneath your tongue, the little flap that goes straight down between the bottom of your tongue down to the bottom of your mouth, it's a lot like that. And it's a kind of an anchor type of thing. It reaches down, and when the intact penis becomes or flaccid again, it's pulling up on the inner mucosa to pull it back up on top of the glands, right? Well, when they amputate the prepuce or circumcise, they have to like snip it this way at the very least, and that'll leave a certain amount of the frenular area, which is very, very sensitive. Again, you can look at the Sorrells study and see they've got colors to identify the sensitivity and everything. A certain amount of that area gets removed, and you can look at preputially amputated penises, and you'll see where the line is, the scar line, where things were cut, right, and where things were pulled back together. Some men have a very small amount of inner mucosa, and others have a larger amount. I personally have a larger amount, so I feel pretty lucky that I have my frenular area pretty well intact still. Other men, they had cut right up here, and I've also heard of cases where, like, you could tell that they were free-handed, and someone cut out the whole frenular area. And those men that have said that, they're really, they feel like they're really missing a lot of sensation down there. And after, I never considered this, I never thought about this. Having my child born 15 years ago and starting to study this and pay attention to, the parts of my penis more and these things that they're talking about, I recognized, yes, that's really a special spot right in there. So, anyways.
I remember reading a Cosmopolitan magazine, and I remember them talking about the frenulum. And then I remember when I became sexually active, I'm looking for these areas, and I'm like, there's nothing like that here. And then not until like 10 years later, I realized that they were describing an intact penis. They were describing a frenulum of an intact male. And I was like, that article was crazy. Like, I don't know what they were talking about, but I've never seen a frenulum because like it's just obliterated in most cases.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a lot of guys don't even know what a frenulum is. They don't know that they're missing this part. But I know what you mean with like uneven scars. I've seen a couple guys where it's just like all around, and then towards the bottom it just goes up, and you can tell that the frenulum was entirely removed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I feel so horrible for those cases. Yeah, pretty sad.
Right.
So, and I always talk about how my cut is different, and I have my inner mucosa, and I believe that's because I was probably cut with a Mogen clamp. Right, Mogen was sued out of existence because of too many botched cases, which kind of, after I've been thinking more about this, it's kind of actually sad in some ways, because and you also see this if you watch videos of the Xhosa tribe and others, where what they're doing is they pull the skin forward and they clip here, right? So that ends up leaving the inner mucosal area. Whereas other methods like the Gomco Clamp and the Plastibell, they stick a bell down over the top of the glands to try to protect it, because that's exactly the problem that they were having with the Mogen Clamp, is that the glands would get harmed by the Gomco Clamp, the Mogen Clamp, because the Mogen Clamp might be set too low and squeeze on the glands and cause harm to the glands, or maybe even amputate part of the glands. Okay, so to discuss the harms to the frenulum, I think I covered everything there. Then we have the ridged band, and that's the part kind of like your lips to your mouth, and you got the inner mucosal part inside your mouth, and you got the outer part the skin of your cheeks and all that. You have and we like to kiss and all that, right? So our lips are sensitive and erotic or whatever. So what I hear from intact men is the ridge band has its own sensualness about it itself. It's normally closed down and squeezed, squeezes closed. It's like a musculature that closes it. You can see this on intact baby boys. It's closed off to the point where it's like a sphincter, a one-way sphincter, so it allows fluid out but doesn't let anything go back in, right? Well, when an intact man has erections, and it starts sliding down the glands and starts spreading out, just that process of spreading out is an enjoyment of itself, right? I think Michael Winnell, you can find a video where he's from Foreskin Revolution down in Australia. He talks in detail about how the prep use is important and it's all of its feelings and everything. So missing all these parts leads to all sorts of issues.
Right.
The first one that I cover is scrotal webbing. So if you don't have the prepuce to roll down during an erection, well, the skin has to come from somewhere, right? So when it's becoming erect, you have the scrotum being drawn up onto the shaft of the penis from down below. And typically the scrotum is hairy on a man, especially hairy guys like me. And yeah, they call that scrotal webbing medically, but I've seen cases really, really bad where the scrotum is all the way up just underneath the glands.
I think I've seen photos of that too.
Yeah. And that can lead to problems with the testes. So if your scrotum is being drawn up and your testes are inside that scrotum bag, the testes can get drawn up and pulled up like around the sides of the shaft when there's an erection.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you watch enough porn and watch out for it, you'll see it. And for me, when I was younger, I'm 50 now, things stretched out down there a little bit, so it doesn't happen anymore, but it used to, where one of my testes would get pulled so tight up against me that it would pop inside of my body. It's like it did a thing.
I have seen that before.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not comfortable, and I'd have to stop having sex or doing whatever, and relax my penis a little bit, just calm things down a little bit, push it out of my body gently, and then I can try to finish off and be more careful about it.
Kind of ruins the mood, though.
Exactly. Probably. Yeah, it doesn't just ruin things for the person that's missing his prepuce, but also the partners. And then on the opposite side, that's the bottom side of the penis, right, where the scrotum is. On the top side, you have the skin that goes up to the pelvic floor, the bottom of the stomach. And if that skin is too tight, then what starts happening is when the erection occurs, the penis starts drawing upward, up towards the stomach. And like for me, I was able to it's kind of like flexing my muscle, right? I could flex it and make my penis, smack my stomach. While it might be a little funny and all, it's not great for sex. First of all, you can think of, you've got the corpus cavernosum inside the penis, right? Women have corpus cavernosum too. It's just smaller and
right
around the vagina instead of inside of a shaft. And you take like one of those balloons that you twist it, and they make it to animals and stuff like that at the fair or the circus or whatever. It's a similar thing, but this is filling up with blood instead of filling up with air. And you just take one of those balloons, you just bend it like that, and it kinks, right? Well, your corpus cavernosum isn't designed to kink; it's supposed to be straight, right? And when there's sexual activity and your partner wants to have things more straight and not up close to your body, that can kind of cause like a kink. Not trying to be kinky here, but yeah. So it's not comfortable. There'll be times where it's like, okay, I can't do that position. Please stop. Come back this way or whatever. So unfortunately, again, that's affecting the sexual activity there. Another, turn off or whatever. Meatalocinosis, something else that occurs quite often. In fact, Brian Earp, you've heard of him? EARP, Brian Earp. He's a bioethicist with Oxford and Yale. Yeah. So he's got the credentials, man. He posted just the other day on Twitter a study or whatever that identified that meatalocinosis happens a lot. I mean, a large percentage. Like it was somewhere around a third or something like that. It's a large number. And that's where the meatus, the end of the penis, where the urethra comes out. Typically, it's stenosis. It closes up, gets smaller. For me, I had a little bit further of a problem when I was like a little boy, or I even grew a little skin thing across the meatus, and when I urinate, spray would go all over the place. And I was visiting my grandmother one time, and she got irritated with that, and was like, "Well, let's just go see a doctor." And she took me to see a doctor, and he recognized, "Oh, you just got a little skin thing, and let's just cut it. It's just scar tissue, so it's not going to hurt. There's no nerves in there or anything. Just get it out of the way." So he just took a scalpel real quick and sliced it out. And I was fine. I think I still have a degree of meatalocinosis. There's an image that I've seen go around where an intact penis is compared to a preputially amputated penis or circumcised penis, and they like push down a little bit to make the urethra spread out a little bit, and you can definitely tell a bit. It's a big difference.
A big difference.
Yeah. So
I think something that people don't mention a lot is when a guy has meatalocinosis, it can take him a while to pee. Mm-hmm. Also, like I don't think people realize how much it affects. It's not just like something that can affect a man's sexual performance, but it's something that can be as annoying as affecting him every time he urinates.
Yeah.
And
thing is if you're practically born like that, or things that it's kind of like the frog in the pot idea.
Right.
You slowly turn up the heat and the frog doesn't jump out. I've dealt with a little bit of a burning sensation down there, as far back as I remember. It's minor though. I'm not going to go get surgery or whatever done because of it, but yeah, it's a little bit of an annoyance. So I shouldn't have to be dealing with that.
Right.
Skin bridges is another thing that happens from time to time. I don't know what the occurrence is. I don't know if you've come across any studies on that, have you?
I don't think I've seen any studies on like the prevalence. There's not really much information on the prevalence of any complications.
Yeah, SPU did a study, and I've seen both the study. There's an image that goes around and it has a link to a study from the SPU, and it came with like 11.5%, something like that, of all infant circumcisions are somehow botched in one way or another, and had to have revisions or whatever. Now, how they define botch and all that, that's kind of hard to determine. I mean, a lot of guys that hate this, they say, well, aren't they all botched? I mean, there was no medical indication, so just doing it in itself is a botch.
Right. The absence of the entire penile skin is a botch.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know how they draw that line. But. And another problem that occurs is erectile dysfunction. It's arguable as to how much erectile dysfunction is due to this or not, but supposedly Viagra is like a huge seller in the United States compared to other countries where more men are intact. And there's two things that contribute to erectile dysfunction. First of all, you look to see if there's anything physically wrong down there. Well, hey, we know there's some things physically wrong down there, but then there's your largest sexual organ of all, it's your brain, right? And if particularly with guys that have figured out or they know there's some sensation missing or whatever down there, they if they all they do is think about it, or it comes up in their head when they're trying to be sexual that this is not as good as it should be or could be or whatever, and that's just turn off, right? So it's kind of hard to stay turned on when that's going on in your head.
Right.
And then there's general botches. There's so many different kinds, like curved penises. They might curve one way or another. I talked about how the pelvic floor is affected for me due to lack of skin on the top, but there's plenty of men, and there's a couple men that I've interviewed recently about this where they were cut too tight on one side or another, so when they have an erection, their penis curves a little bit to the
right.
And then they also have more scar tissue or whatever because it was cut wrong or put back together wrong. Who knows? You're cutting skin. There's going to be scar tissue, and scar tissue is not a good thing. And scar tissue does not belong on genitals.
Right. Right.
I think that's one of the things on Your Whole Baby we see a lot, right?
Right.
And then other general botches is like the glands getting amputated or pieces cut out or chunks removed or whatever because of accidents or whatever, or things don't come apart right. Or one of the things that they do when they do this process, because the glands in the inner mucosa are attached when they're an infant or whatever, they have to stick a probe in there to break it apart. Or the Jewish practice involves a long thumbnail, and they'll stick the thumbnail up in there to separate it. Right? Yeah, I know it's it's disgusting and horrible, and
yeah.
I know. I see the face. That's great. So that process might end up harming the glands. Well, I mean, it does harm the glands. Right. Sure, we know that, but they can harm it worse.
Yeah, it could cause a long-lasting chronic damage.
Yeah.
That doesn't go away.
Yeah, it doesn't heal. Or at least doesn't heal in a proper way. I always laugh when someone say, "Oh, it healed in a week or so." It's like, really? Did the prepuce grow back?
I don't think so. Yeah. I looked at the list of complications. One thing I noticed or one thing I didn't see was, what is it called when keratin builds up and the skin thickens?
Keratinization.
Keratinization. That's it. I feel like that's a pretty big one. Just the glands not being as sensitive and thin of skin as it should be. I feel like that's a major complication that almost every single circumcised man deals with.
Yeah, the nerves of the glands gets buried
with
built up skin on the glands. And men that have done some restoration will attest to that. In fact, a couple of guys that I've interviewed for this so far have already said, when they started getting coverage of their glands and things started to slough off of their glands became more intense.
Right. I know of a guy who would have his penis in his underwear up against his body so that his glands would not rub against his underwear, because and that prevented keratinization from happening. But it's physically uncomfortable for a sensitive glands to be against underwear.
Yeah, even for intact guys like me, I instead of having my penis lay down and have the upper part in this area rubbing up against my underwear, that gets uncomfortable. So I have to wear like tidy whities or something like that. So my penis is held close to my body, right?
Right.
Otherwise things, or like my meatus, just if it moves around and rubs against, clothes, that this often happens for me when I'm
Right.
dealing with swimming trunks, right? And after swimming for a while, that area will get inflamed.
Right.
So, and I'm not restoring.
Right.
So.
It's like a lot of people, when you talk about how the foreskin, or I guess just the penis skin, is supposed to protect the glands, they'll say something like, well, we're not cavemen, we're not running around, there's not like any dirt or debris, we wear clothes. And it's like, the skin also protects from things like clothing.
Yeah.
It's not just dirt that the foreskin is there to protect from, it's there to protect from friction.
Yeah.
So
And that's why there's this thing called the manhood you can order and
right.
stick that on your penis and help protect it from clothing too. It's interesting.
Right. I've seen that one before.
One of my interviewees testified to using that too. So, yeah. Any other botches that you can think of that I didn't cover?
Inclusion cysts. Have you ever heard of inclusion cysts?
Well, I had one person talk to me about how he had this one spot where the scar was, right next to the scar, and it was like a pimple. And he had to pop it on a regular basis and get the gunk out. It went away after he started restoring, but is that what that would be, or?
I believe so. But sometimes cysts have hard material.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually seen it firsthand around the scar line where the scar tissue has pockets in it, and hard buildup would actually generate.
Yeah, I guess I can imagine that. I mean, I have a huge scar for my appendectomy. it's
right.
It's no fun dealing with that. It gets itchy sometimes and all that. And
right.
It doesn't feel good to touch it in the wrong ways and all that.
Right. I mean, I think everyone with a scar that's big at all would know that scar tissue is actually pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it doesn't function the way the skin should function.
Yeah.
It should be common sense that a scar on the genitals is just completely not desirable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just causes problems.
Yeah, and I various guys have different levels of scarification around there. So I'm sure some guys don't think that they are too affected by it, but either way.
Some guys don't even know that they have a scar. So
yeah, exactly.
There's that too.
Yeah, probably all depends on who their butcher was and how the butcher did it and put things back together and how well things healed and all that later on.
And if they had to have revision,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and if their penis ripped when they like sometimes with a really tight circumcision,
Mm-hmm.
when the penis like grows during puberty and then starts to rip open,
you get more scars.
with erections.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get another scar line from that. That's
Yeah. I've been wondering more and more lately. I've seen like videos, testimonials by guys that would get cut as adults, and most they were either pressured in society or had medical issues, but and of course it depends on how much they get cut, but they would also talk about how they would get an erection that they can't necessarily control when they're trying to heal, and then staples or whatever get popped out or whatever, and then they have more problems. They have to go back and get it fixed or whatever. Even babies get erections. I mean, in fact, according to one of the older WHO manuals, they flick the penis to cause an erection so they can make sure they cut the right amount in the right place, so they can identify where the the corona of the glands is, and that's where they aim to cut, right? And then, so do babies end up having these tears or separations as they're healing too? Do they get erections in the middle of the night when they're sleeping or something? I don't know.
Right. I would almost think that as an adult, getting a circumcision done, wouldn't the doctor figure out the amount of skin required for a full erection? I would just think that would be something they would do to prevent stitches and staples or glue from ripping. But it actually sounds like a lot of adult men who undergo the surgery actually experience still having not enough skin for an erection.
Yeah. Yeah. Different experiences for different men. But yeah, at least as an adult man, if you decide you want to get cut off or whatever, it's like you can draw your own dotted lines around, your penis and say, okay, dot, cut here.
Right.
No more. No more than that. That's all. And I want to keep my frenulum area. I want to keep my inner mucosa, or I don't, or whatever. Right. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all the physical aspects, and then this gets into the sexual partnership part, where those physical aspects can make things different or whatever. I already addressed one where, like, my partner, they try to do a certain position or whatever, I wouldn't be able to let them have that or do that position or whatever. And because I don't have my inner mucosa, I have my inner mucosa, but I don't have my prepuce to roll down. I don't have that gliding mechanism. I don't have the moisture and lube and all that. There's been a couple cases with a couple of my partners where if we got too excited and jumped into it too fast, or whatever, I would end up tearing her vagina by pushing too hard or whatever, and not getting that WAP on,
Yeah.
And so that's a heterosexual side of this, right? And then
Right.
you have anal, and you have homosexual docking. So with anal, obviously you don't have lubrication there, but an intact man, because he's got that rolling mechanism, because he has some lubrication, he can still do anal without having to pull out the KY jelly or whatever.
Right.
And with homosexual docking, it just doesn't work. You can't dock without something to dock with.
When I learned what docking was, I was so confused, just because when I was that young, I didn't even know what foreskin was.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought one man would have to physically insert his penis into the other man's penis, and I was like, I don't.
How that work, right? Well, now you know that's how it works. They're sticking inside of the prepuce, right?
Yeah, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
Now.
I like to pick on Jim Jeffries whenever I get a chance on this one, because he explained docking on one of his episodes, and it's the same Jim Jeffries that tackled Elon Savroni over in Israel, the guy over there that's done bloodstained pants protesting, which makes him like the bravest guy in the world. But, he mocked Jonathan Conte and all that. He picked on antagonist, and I guess Jim said that he had his own son cut because he loves his son, right? So he was defending the practice, and I ended up protesting in front of a couple of his venues before this whole pandemic started. But yeah, so he did talk about docking, and it's like, thanks, Jim, for raising awareness. So you don't know whether your boy will grow up and will decide to be gay. He might lean that way, and he might want to have his prepuce to enjoy his partners with.
Right.
Okay, so that's the sexual effect on with partners. Now into the psychological effects that all this can cause. Starting off with the trauma from the cut. And we understand that there's been like some studies, like they try to MRI the baby as it's getting cut, before, during, and after, and like the brain never goes back to baseline after the cut. And I guess they did some studies where some babies were anesthetized and others were not, or at least had nerve block put into their penis before getting cut, and they had to stop the study because they discovered real quick that this is torture, and they can't continue torturing these babies.
Right.
And then beyond, and there's things like I'll also get into this with the mother-child bond, but we hear often about how babies come back after they've been cut and they won't breastfeed or whatever because you not only have the trauma from the actual slice, which only takes a little bit of time. You have the trauma from the baby is feeling this pain when it's with its mother and it's trying to breastfeed or whatever, and the pain goes on for several days until it heals. And then you have the trauma from the discoveries of the loss. Guys like me, we get older enough and we start studying this. We start comparing how the normal penis works compared to ours and all that. It's like, I took about a dozen years to go through my round after round after round of grief as I learned bit by bit. I didn't learn all these things about all the physical harms all at once. I even tried to share multiple aspects of the harms with one Muslim guy, and I think I told him about the moisture lube part. I was like, okay, well, the guy gets to bring lubrication to the game and everything, and it's like, he was like, what, really? And he got mad. He's like, man, this is pissing me off. That would be great. And then I tried to tell him, something else, and he's like, dude,
Are you kidding me?
My brain's just shut off now. It's like I can't handle anything more. Too much. So, and I imagine I was that way. It's like I start studying a little bit and learn one little aspect, and then I get a little upset or whatever, and I'm an introvert, so I start processing this internally and step away, and after a while, maybe I kind of process the grief and everything, and then come back and learn something else and go through it all again. So yeah, and that trauma from having those discoveries, or realizing that things don't feel the way they're supposed to, or whatever, sometimes lead to suicide. In fact, I interviewed with one guy earlier today that attempted suicide over it, and I've interviewed two other people that were connected with people that committed suicide. One was a woman whose husband committed suicide. She doesn't know 100%, that it was totally due to being circumcised and being upset about it, but she does know he was upset about, that he had lost something. And then another man, his buddy committed suicide, and his buddy talked to him a lot about how angry he was about the loss and all. And that kind of keyed this man into becoming an advocate for genital autonomy, and that's why I interviewed with him.
Right.
And you probably know like Jonathan Conte and Alex Hardy and David Raymer and stories like that. And I'm afraid that we haven't seen the last of suicides. In fact, we've probably just started seeing the beginning of them, because men are the people are finding out about this. They're seeing the bloodstained pants and the documentaries and all that, and might decide to start looking into it more themselves, or they might stay back and avoid learning and kind of stay in ignorant bliss or blissful ignorance or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And I can't, and in a lot of ways, I can't blame them for that. Personally, the selfish part of me kind of wishes sometimes that I was blissfully ignorant on this. It's like, man, I wish I didn't know about this. But at the same time, if I didn't, then I wouldn't be here talking about it and trying to protect the next generation from it.
It's a really big burden, like knowing everything about like the harms of circumcision. It can really weigh down on a person. And speaking of suicide, I do have to wonder if any regret parents have ever committed suicide over letting their child be circumcised.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it, but I could imagine that would be horrifying. Realizing 5-10 years down the road what had happened.
Yeah, I even myself, being that close to being a regret parent myself, the thought of the fact that I was okay with my son getting genitally cut makes me sick to think about it. To think that I could be sitting here today, 15 years after he was born, with him, missing that part of his body. It makes me sick. So I try to avoid thinking about it, but I had to talk about it. So here I am thinking about it again.
Yeah. I didn't watch a circumcision video until after my son was born. He was born at 32 weeks and he was only 4 pounds. Yeah, he was in the hospital for a month. So him being so small and so like medically fragile, it just seeing it happen to another baby, it was revolting, heartbreaking even.
Yeah.
Just the thought that could have happened to my son if I hadn't advocated for him.
Yeah, I get that medical professionals need to shut off a certain part of their brain in order to do their job, but I wish they wouldn't turn off that part of the brain when it comes to this.
Right.
And we'll get into that here in just a second, because that's a psychological effect as well. So then there's children. Of course, you got the children that were cut and they, discovering it or whatever, and you've got, it's arguable, like, okay, well, they were infants, so they're not going to remember, but then you've got kids that were cut at 5-year-old, 8 years old, like, I guess in the Philippines it's like 8-year-old boys, and Turkey is like maybe 10-year-old boys or whatever, and I guess there was a study of the Philippine boys, and they found that 3/4 of them have PTSD.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like, wow. Hopefully that study will shine some light on it. Maybe get the Philippines to reconsider this, because they have a very different cut supposedly than what it's different than a preputial amputation, but still a cut.
I hadn't heard that. Do you know what they do different in the Philippines?
I don't know in detail. It's been brought up multiple times. There's one guy I follow on Twitter who actually spoke out against the practice in the Philippines, and oh my gosh, he got tackled. I mean, there were dozens, maybe even hundreds of people that are Filipino that use the word supot, S-U-P-O-T, on them.
Right.
It's really ingrained in their culture over there. So
Right.
yeah,
it's really sad.
yeah. Anyways, so then there's also children that aren't cut. This affects everyone. It's not just the people that got their genitals cut, but I've been using Greta Thunberg a lot lately. I don't know if you read the story that her dad told about her, but before Greta got popular and went to the UN and all that, she was learning about the problem with the global change in the world, and she got depressed and she got withdrawn and kind of went into depression until she went out and held a sign on a sidewalk, expressing her feelings about it, and then that's when she started getting more popular, and people, she got her voice, and she came alive again, right? So I even think about my own kids who, they will even get involved sometimes on social media with me or whatever. They'll look at, they'll hear me talking about this, or they'll see what's going on online where people are trying to justify this practice, and they're just disgusted or just stunned or shocked or whatever. And they've even gone out with me to do the Bloodstained Man protests, and they're happy to be with Dad and all that, but they hear and see the people justifying it or arguing that we're wrong or whatever, and I worry about their psychological health over this, but
Right.
yeah, it's kind of a struggle. In some ways I don't want them to have to live in this world, but with that going on in the world, but I don't want to hide them from it and then have them too shocked when they get to adults. So
Right.
and like Greta, they they're out there protesting and stuff, and they're expressing their voice, and that's what I want, is that they feel confident enough to express their feelings and their thoughts on it.
Right. I think that people don't really realize that what they're saying actually affects other people, especially children. Um, but they can't realize that because they have to so violently defend the decision that they made or the decision that was made for them.
Yeah,
They almost have to say those things
mm-hmm.
so that they can feel better about their own circumstances.
Yeah, it's too traumatizing to consider, the reality. It was
Right.
hard enough for me to consider it when I first started looking into it. I mean, I was religion never played into it for me, so that was one cognitive dissonance layer that was not a problem for me, because I really strongly believe in religious freedom. So it's like, I don't want to take that religious freedom away from my children. But the medical side of it was harder for me to accept, and I had to keep digging into it and kept asking questions on that, even after we decided to keep my oldest son intact. And so I was never, I don't think I was ever violently defending it, but I was definitely asking the questions.
Right.
Okay, so that was children. The next section is about the medical professionals. And again, I was identifying how medical professionals have to kind of shut off part of their empathy, part of their brain, right, in order to focus on the science side of things and just focus on getting the work done to hopefully heal the people that they're dealing with. But yeah, biomedical professionals don't shut that off, and they are very empathetic, and there's several medical professionals, as you know, in our movement. There's several on the board of Your Whole Baby. There's nurses for the rights of the child. There's doctors opposing circumcision. There are several medical professionals that are very much against this practice.
Right.
And some of those have shown up on videos and all that, and they express their feelings and their emotions about dealing with it.
Right.
So I can imagine that that's really difficult to do. Like work in a hospital or whatever. I've actually interviewed once before for working in a hospital, but today I just couldn't imagine working at a hospital. I couldn't trust myself.
Like a lot of them have to go through, like in their schooling, they have to either assist or perform. And even when they object, they're told, well, you have to watch. And it's,
Yeah.
I don't, this might be off on a tangent, but something that bothers me about medical professionals and circumcision is it seems like it's out of a lot of these medical professionals' scope of practices. There's no reason that an obstetrician should be operating on a penis.
Exactly.
Or a midwife. A midwife is for delivering babies, managing a pregnancy. It has nothing to do with, and even a pediatrician specializes in children's health. A pediatrician isn't a surgeon. A pediatrician isn't, and even when it's a urologist performing the surgery, it's still out of their scope of practice because it's not a necessary surgery. It's a cosmetic, if you could call it that.
It might be best for a plastic surgeon to be doing it.
Right. It would be more appropriate for a plastic surgeon to be doing, but you can't take your newborn to a plastic surgeon because that would be crazy.
Although you'd be admitting that this is a cosmetic surgery.
Right.
Which is actually true because you can look at the medical building codes and that's what it says.
Right.
Under cosmetic.
But there's no reason that an OB should be there's an OB has nothing to do with penises. So.
Yeah, they're trained to deal with vaginas, right? Yeah, exactly. And when you look at the kind of training that urologists deal with, it's like they're supposed to be dealing with the urethra, the whole urinary
right, the
tract.
Urinary.
Yeah, the prepuce is barely even touches that area, right? And unless it's closing off so tight at the end that it's not letting urine out, it really doesn't have much other involvement in the urinary tract.
Right.
But unfortunately, I actually read a medical textbook, a urology medical textbook that was edited for 2020, so very new. Had 8 editors that edited this book, and I went through it piece by piece. It was someone took they scanned it, so it was available online. So I took screenshots of the pieces of it that I had issues with and stuck it into a document and explained what's the problem with it and how they're biased or whatever, and put links to various studies and all that, explaining, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. You guys are very much pushing urologists towards just jumping to preputially amputating boys instead of looking at other solutions first. That's very problematic.
Right.
So I sent that to I found their emails and stuff like that and sent it to them, and I think it's 7 out of 8 of them responded with okay, we got it, response. So
nice. Well, you tried.
Yeah, no, who knows?
They know somebody objects.
Exactly. At the very, very least, they know that.
Right.
And who knows? Maybe they'll adjust the next revision due to my feedback.
Possibly.
Even if a little bit.
I'm still stewing over doctors performing circumcisions. I even a urologists are trained in pathology. So anytime they look at something, they're looking for something wrong. It's almost like they probably couldn't recognize a healthy, regular penis if they saw one, just because they're so trained to find something wrong. Of course, they're going to find a reason to circumcise, especially when oh,
yep. And particularly urologists that are, might have self-selection bias, and they might have cultural bias, whatever. They've and they have bias, of course, too, based on what they were trained in their schools. So this guy here that wrote this book, Jay Jackson, he wrote the Circumcision Scar book. He actually talks about how he went and talked to multiple urologists because he wanted his foreskin back or whatever, and he got chased out of at least one office, and I guess one urologist took his penis and he had been restoring by this point, whatever, and the urologist took his penis and just forced his preputial back like this and said, "There, that's the way it should be." Wow. That's good bedtime manner for you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if I ever decide to need to get some work done on my penis. I think I'll jump over to Europe or something like that. Take a flight. It'll probably be worth it. I don't know. I might even go down to Mexico. Who knows?
Yeah. I would definitely think it would be worth it to find a doctor who wasn't trained by the American medical system.
Yeah. There's videos too of people that have come across the water or up from Mexico or South America, and we're going to the AAP conference or ACOG conference or whatever to get the training and everything, and they outright, they would go see the bloodstained men and do an interview and say, yeah, we don't do that over at, in our country, and we're definitely against it or whatever. So yeah, yay for the support from the international folks.
Yeah.
Okay, then the next thing is the psychological effects of the parent, right? And I was expressing earlier how just the idea that I was okay with the idea of my own child getting genitally cut, because I was very ignorant at the time. But still, it makes me the thought of it just deeply sickens me. Like guttural, it just bothers me that I could have allowed that to happen, and I'd be sitting here as a regret parent right now.
Right. I think that something that I haven't seen discussed a lot is like older generations. Like once a parent becomes a grandparent, when they see that their child isn't choosing the same thing that was chosen for them, I think that makes the grandparent uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you see a couple different things happen, but most of the time it's that the grandparent is like, ew, like why would you why would you choose not to circumcise?
Yeah.
Or just being generally angry about it. And I think part of that is they then have to question their own parenting and the choices that they made.
Yeah, sure. And this has been going on for well over 100 years now in the United States, so commonly. I mean,
Right.
The height of it was like between the 50s and the 80s. So it's so common. So the chances are pretty high that grandparents today will be dealing with that.
Right.
So yeah, my own parents, and yeah, my in-laws, though, they weren't bothered by it at all because my father-in-law was intact.
I know several men whose parents are intact, or fathers rather, but they still chose to go ahead and circumcise their children, or sons. But it just drives me nuts that decision was made, because if you think that that's the right choice, then why don't you go get it done yourself?
Exactly.
So it's like it's just a little strange.
Yeah. I don't get that one either. I'd like to talk to more of those intact grandparents to understand more. I in some ways I wish my father-in-law was still here, But he kind of got dementia years ago, and he's gone now.
Oh,
But yeah,
I had heard from one person that the reason that they had chose circumcision for their child was because they had been made fun of, like in the locker room. There's a couple problems I have with that. Um, Obviously, you're giving in to a bully. Children are going to be bullied for various reasons. Um, and that's just something that happens. And secondly, kids don't get naked for gym class anymore. That was weird to begin
well,
with.
that's not completely accurate. I was actually um, a chaperone at my oldest son's um, pool party for school. For school.
Okay.
And it was a school sponsored thing and everything like that. So I had to go through a background check and all that. And I had the best background check. So they actually asked me specifically out of all the men to be the only man in the changing room. All the boys changed out of their swimming trunks into regular clothes again. And I actually have a story about that. It connects to this. So my own son, he's over here getting changed out in the open, no worries at all, getting totally naked. He's fine. Almost all the other boys are all lined up to get into the stalls. There's only 2 stalls, and there's all these boys all lined up. So it's like, gosh, it's going to take forever. So one boy at a time in each stall, and you know how packs are. Sometimes you have a leader of the pack. There's this one boy that's like kind of getting all these other boys riled up about this one other boy who is like black sheep of the clan, and he was a little chubby, but so this boy goes in to get changed, and he and I'm standing by these doors and kind of controlling the flow and everything. And I was trying to convince him to like, we all have the same parts. Get changed, guys. You don't need to hide in the stalls, but there's no convincing them. So I just had to wait it out. Anyways, this one boy, it was like the black sheep, whatever, chubby one. He leans up against the door and he falls out because the door pops loose, right? And boy, that got all the kids laughing at him. I felt bad for the kid. I picked I offer him a hand, pick him up, and stand him up so he can go back in and finish getting changed. But when he falls, he was completely naked, and this boy was not intact. They weren't picking on my son; they were picking on this other boy. My son's over there intact, and it's plain as day. So like you just said, the boys can get picked on about, or children will get picked on about something one way or another. And if you cut your child, you're basically being his first boy.
Right. I mean, I think that it's a strange idea that you could prevent bullying by having a surgery performed on your child. Instead, wouldn't it make sense to teach your children that like everybody's different, and sometimes people pick on other people, but like teach them how to deal with a bully.
Yeah.
or teach your kids not to be a bully.
Self-esteem, confidence,
Yeah.
and not to be afraid to stand out and be unique and take the spotlight if it's offered to you.
Right. Circumcision does not remove the need to teach your children about bullies.
That's right.
And circumcision, if you're doing it for that reason, is just lazy parenting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're also not teaching him about consent.
Right. That you violate consent for him for the first time. And I know a lot of people, if you mention consent and babies, they're like, oh, what, so you don't change their diaper without asking? But there's a lot of problems with an argument like that. But when you're permanently altering something that is not necessary, of course that's something that individual should be able to consent to.
Yeah.
And they say, well, babies can't consent, and that's like exactly right. Of course a baby can't consent. but that's the difference between circumcision and changing a diaper.
Yeah.
You don't obtain an infant's consent to change their diaper because it's not something that permanently alters anything, and it's not something that can wait. You can't wait until the baby is 18 to ask if they would like to have their diaper changed. That's like basic care. Circumcision doesn't fall under the scope of basic care.
No. Yeah, some people use the term implied consent. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, the child is going to want to be taken care of, obviously, but circumcision is not care; it's harm.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So those many psychological effects on parents, and I mean, it probably especially when the child grows up and decides, well, I wish I had mine. I wish you wouldn't have done that to me, or whatever. Whether the parent wants to accept responsibility or not for it, I'm sure that every parent that gets that from their child is psychologically impacted. It's gotta
Right.
affect you, whether you think that your child is being reasonable or not.
Right. Because whether you take it to heart or not, it's something that you have to mull over at least a little bit.
Yeah. So wouldn't it be just great if all boys were just left intact, and then it wouldn't even be a question? Or
Right.
like, I mean, if 90% of the boys were left intact, not likely that your boy is going to come to you and say, "Why didn't you get me circumcised like the other 10%?" It's more like, maybe, well, happen, maybe, well, why didn't you get me circumcised like the other 50%? Or, it's,
Right.
low numbers now. So depending on where you are in the United States, but, or really be more honest, and you look at the whole world, it's like, why didn't you get me circumcised like the other 30% of the world?
Right. I live in Pennsylvania, so the cut rate around here is actually pretty high.
Yeah.
I live in a rural area too, so it's even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably a lot more closed minds too, I would imagine, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's sad. I'm sorry. Well, thanks for being brave and doing this. A lot of people hide up behind anonymity, maybe, take two accounts on Twitter or whatever, so they don't
Right.
have to reveal their identity and all that. So, but I think that having real people show their faces and express this clearly and openly and all that kind of makes it more real for people that are hearing it. Right? They're
Right.
not just
And
looking at a doctor's opposing circumcision or your whole baby website. That's
right.
you get the faces behind it.
It's definitely it's hard to speak out, just because I know for a fact that there are a lot of people who I'm friends with, or a lot of people who are in my family who had their child circumcised. And I know that when I share information, or when I'm wearing a shirt that says your whole baby, I know that that's something that gets to them after the fact. And I don't, that's not my kind of activism, like throwing it in someone's face afterwards, because I don't feel like it does, like it's not as impactful as getting to people before it happens. But that's something that holds me back, is because I know that I'm hurting a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are people that see that, who haven't yet had children, or people who are expecting,
Yeah.
who can really process that beforehand.
Yeah. It's a bit of a conundrum, because you're kind of weighing two things here, right? You've got
Right.
the feelings, the emotions of people that are dealing with their cognitive dissonance. They got cut, they cut their child, or they are medical professionals cutting or whatever. And if you're out there speaking or wearing t-shirts like this or whatever, and they see it, that might trigger them. And
Right.
no one really wants to have people get triggered. They don't want them emotionally harmed in any way or whatever. But at the same time, we have these tens of thousands of children globally getting their genitalia cut without a medical need. They're getting harmed. They're getting physically harmed, not just emotionally harmed, but physically harmed. And they will be dealing with that forever, right? For
And
their
it's
entire life.
cyclical too. Like
Yeah,
that physical harm breeds emotional harm and possibly more physical harm.
exactly.
So
Yeah, goes back to it's cyclical in the way that, okay, I'm cut, so I'm going to cut my son, right? And my son's going to cut that son, and
right,
all the way down the track. And so we have to accept that that it's going to be an emotional challenge for a lot of people,
right,
as is pretty much any um, movement, right? It does have
right.
these challenges. So I'm sure that they were like when they were trying to abolish slavery, same sort of thing. It's like, oh, I'm a slave owner.
Yeah,
Yeah, so stop owning slaves. Let me go.
right. I think that people really need to realize that just because something has been happening, or just because something is common, or just because it was done to you and you turned out okay,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that that's the way things need to stay, or
Yeah,
that that's okay.
yeah, yeah, sure. So the I last set of people that I have listed under psychological are intact men. And really, we could even say intact women in cultures where there's female genital mutilation going on.
Right,
But um, I compare it to this a lot. When I go out and about, I drive quite a bit for Uber and Lyft, and I see these like tents and camps and stuff right on the sidewalks in the LA area and all that. And people that are, they don't have a shower, they don't have a warm bed to sleep in. They might even have challenges with, feeding themselves. And I'm home eating a good meal and warm clothes and warm bed and a shower. And it's like, I feel bad that I get to have that and those people out there don't. So I've been told by intact men, yeah, yeah, I feel bad that I have what my buddies don't have, or I feel ashamed because, like, shouldn't I be cut too, or is that somehow beneficial and I'm missing out on those benefits?
right.
So yeah, I would just much rather see a world where most everyone has all their genitalia intact and there was no status of your genitalia
Right.
to be discussed.
That would be ideal.
Yeah, someday, hopefully, my grandkids will get to experience something like that in the future.
I see a lot of like online intactivism involves like looking at social media posts and like trying to comment. It's actually really sad to see how many people will body shame intact men. Um,
Mm,
like the wording that they choose to use, like calling foreskin gross, or
yeah.
saying that they wouldn't give that man oral sex, or that they would
Mhm,
not have penetrative sex with them because they'd be afraid of infections.
yeah.
Um, or they call it like something like an anteater or a
Hmm.
turtle dick. Um,
Yeah.
it's just it's really sad to see how people are willing to talk about a person's body.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, it's I don't know where along the lines um people got the idea that that's acceptable.
Mhm,
Even with the culture of like, okay, this is desirable and this is undesirable.
mhm.
Um, even if that's what society generally believes, um, I just I don't understand where people think it's okay to say those things. And
Yeah.
I know that has to hurt intact men, like that has to damage their self-esteem quite a bit.
Oh yeah, yeah. And men have some intact men have definitely testified to that. It's body shaming. And if you've ever been body shamed in any way, shape, or form, yeah.
But like, it's not just body shaming. It's like a man's penis is pretty central to a man's self-esteem. Like it's not
What
it's
makes
not
this even harder.
right. It's not like chubby love handles or a bald spot. It's a penis. Like that's
Yeah.
a man has quite a bit of self-esteem surrounding like, you know, the manhood.
Yeah, you look at the rituals. In a lot of cases, getting cut is their transition to manhood,
Right.
right? Like the Zosa or some Islamic tribes, other Islamic tribes, they say, okay, well, it's your time, and this is when you're going through your bar mitzvah or whatever, and we're gonna cut you. Like in Turkey, I guess that's like the thing is where they transition. And so
Right.
they get excited. The boys are actually kind of excited about this because, hey, I get to be a man or whatever. This is a big moment in my life. They're celebrating everything. So it's kind of hard to consider the fact that you're actually getting damaged.
Right.
And there's definitely a lot of male ego in the United States. And it's like, size of penis is kind of important. Like, does size matter? But there's a lot of belief that it does, and so that's like an important part. It's like a defining part to a man's ego, and if it's really difficult to consider the possibility that it's mutilated,
Right.
less than it would have been if they would have been left alone with their babies. So that's part of the what's underlying the cognitive dissonance when we're trying to reach them.
Right.
I often refer to the cognitive dissonance in this movement. I compare it to other movements, but the cognitive dissonance on this movement is so deeper than others. You got like multiple layers. Like I am cut, my children are cut. I'm a doctor and I do cutting. My religion believes in cutting. So you
Right.
have to peel through all those layers to get them to open up to the possibility that this is bad.
Right.
And if they have more layers, the harder it is.
Yeah.
Okay, the next section is about relationships. And the first part is child-parent trust. So this can start and maybe expand anywhere along a person's life, right? Maybe you trust your child, maybe the child trusts the parent less right after the cut because, like, you let me go, you weren't bonding with me, and then the child comes back, and it might be hard for the child to breastfeed or whatever, might be crying and whatever, and that's
Right.
probably the first break in that trust. And then the child gets older and starts learning about it, and the parent isn't like sympathetic or whatever, empathetic to the child. That breaks down the trust even more. So I don't know if you can identify with that much, being that you're not cut yourself, but then there's the co-parenting aspect to this, and we've in this movement we've seen cases where people have gotten divorced or really close divorced. In the Your Whole Baby community group, we see this all the time where a woman comes in and says, I want to protect my child, I don't want them cut, but my husband does, and how do I deal with them and all that? So that definitely creates stresses between the parents of a child. And then there's the mother-child bond. My wife is a trained doula, and one of the things that often comes up is how important the skin to skin contact is, and the bonding time right after birth and all that. It's like the baby's supposed to be held close to the mother, so it's not too traumatized from the birth, or less traumatized at least. I'm sure there's some trauma to going through that hole, but yeah, to be taken away right away to have your genitalia cut afterwards, I can't imagine that helps the bond. And we even talk a lot about how breastfeeding is impacted in many cases from this procedure.
Right. We know, I'm pretty sure cortisol interferes with other hormones that are responsible for bonding, like oxytocin. So cortisol inhibits oxytocin. So when the infant is in pain and is stressed out, it can't bond because it's in pain.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure cortisol also slows brain development.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a pretty crucial time for an infant.
Yeah.
And
I've often seen cases where the people say, well, my baby never cried or whatever. Maybe the baby cried later on, but there's multiple reasons why the baby might not have cried. One is the baby is too young to know how to process what it's feeling in its body. Right. It might not have gotten that far. Then there's also the possibility that the mother was drugged for, to reduce pain during labor, and those drugs go into the baby's bloodstream, and therefore the baby is very out of it when it's getting its genitalia cut. So maybe it wasn't able to fight and scream or whatever. And then when the baby comes back and the drugs or the Novocaine or whatever that numbed the penis wears off, then I don't know, go out there and cut yourself somewhere, and after taking some numbing medicine around that spot, and then wait a few hours and see what it feels like. Later on, it's like it's still not going to be healed. It's going to be, it's going to give sharp pains and all that. So as an adult, you're probably going to want to take Tylenol or whatever, or put some medicine on it to keep it from becoming painful. But those things aren't typically given to babies.
Right. I think another thing that happens is that parents misremember what happened. The immediate period after giving birth is pretty cloudy. It's pretty hard to remember. And I don't know what mom would be like, yeah, my baby cried a lot when they came back after being circumcised. It's like it's not something, it's not like a highlight that you would want to remember and then share on the internet. I think we see a lot of moms talk about, well, my baby didn't even cry, because a lot of moms, that if they did remember their baby crying, they're not going to want to share about that. Probably out of fear of judgment. But I think it's more likely for moms to just say, my baby didn't cry, just because that's what benefits them. That's what looks better. That's what sounds better. That's what they'd like to remember.
Yeah. I can definitely see that. Another relationship section on this is about pedophilia. And there's multiple thoughts or theories on how not just male genital cutting, but all the genital cutting practices, rituals in the world contribute to pedophilia. In fact, one of the things I realized is when you think about forced marriages and marriages of older men to young women, like really young women, that primarily only happens, as far as I can tell, it only happens in genital cutting cultures. You don't hear about, these forced marriage issues in like South America or other Hispanic communities. You don't hear about it in Russia. You don't hear about it. I don't think you hear about it in China. I haven't heard of that being a ritual of any kind in China. So these are all places where genital cutting is not a regular ritual. Right?
That's a connection that I didn't make before.
Really? Yeah. I have another theory about it. Well, I was actually talking my previous interview. We kind of made the same connection because he said that he's only been with intact or cut guys, and he remembers going down and one intact guy, and the intact guy wanted squeezing on his penis, squeezing with the hand or the mouth or whatever. And when the man doesn't have all of his nerves here, all this tissue that's supposed to be sensitive there, that's supposed to generate that sexual response, what's left are the underlying nerves from pressure. So you got your minors nerve corpuscles, which is just from light touch, and then you got other nerves that are deeper down. And my theory here is that the belief, at least, is that younger women have tighter vaginas. Right? From what I understand, there's like a big trend of older women getting labiaplasty and other things to tighten things up down there for their partner or whatever. So if there's an attraction to tighter vaginas, well, therefore there's a physical attraction to younger women, not just because they look younger or whatever, but because there's a physical difference.
Right. Which doesn't make any sense. Like labiaplasty alters the external part of the vagina, and then the part of the vagina that would be tight or loose is muscle. And you can't I don't think you can tighten that surgically with a labiaplasty.
Yeah,
but I mean, people do go and do that. It's just the logistics don't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple excuses like looks too.
Right. But I get what you're saying. I never thought about it before, but I have thought of how like labiaplasty does seem to be to make the vagina look prepubescent. And then there's also it's just recently, but how women are expected to be clean shaven.
Yeah, like the Brazilian or whatever. Yeah. Well, here's the thing though, with FGM, when you study that, one of the bad things that occur in cases where they cut away the labia on the women is birth, right? So I mean, it's not. This is mechanics, really. Just like the penis moves a lot, there's a lot of change and growth, and it expands and contracts. Same thing with vagina, right? It has to expand to like 10 centimeters for birth.
Right.
Well, you need to have the tissue there to accommodate that expansion.
Right.
The labia, right? That labia gets stretched out and tightened as the vagina spreads out, right? Because the labia is around the vagina, vaginal opening. So the thinking is that if the labia is removed, then that creates, it makes things not necessarily tighter this way, but it increases the friction.
Okay.
Right. And if the man is wanting more friction, not just tightness, maybe that's another reason. I don't know. I mean, there's so many ways to think about this.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that like at a core level, not just like pedophilia, but society has an obsession with control and ownership over children. And I think for pedophilia to happen, you have to think that you have a right to that child's body. So viewing children as property or viewing them as automatically, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
An extension of you?
Not just that. Just at a lower level than adults.
Oh, okay.
Viewing them
Second
as
second level citizens or second
second
class
class
citizen? Yeah.
citizen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost not just that, but like not even citizens.
Yeah.
It's almost like a lot of adults view children as not having any sort of rights. It's like they're objects.
Yeah.
And I think that that's part of, like, we do kind of have like a pedophile culture.
Mm-hmm. It's
I
scary when you think about it.
Yeah. It's not just a sexual thing, because I think it stems from viewing children as property.
Yeah.
For adults to do with what they please. And
For
while it's generally accepted that children are not for adults' sexual pleasure, which makes a lot of sense, I think it's a little bit easier for an adult to have, like, sexual thoughts about a child because of how society views children.
Yeah.
If we viewed children as having rights, and as
Individuals.
if we viewed children as individuals, it's possible that pedophiles wouldn't think that they were entitled to children's bodies.
Yeah.
I think that it's a really deep issue that has a lot of causes. It has a lot of factors into it.
Yeah.
But one of them. Oh, sorry.
Pedophilia goes deep. I unfortunately have some close relationship with all that, but part of it is that pedophiles actually believe that they're doing the child good.
Right. And some of it is the pedophile doesn't care about the child's best interests. They just think that either the child won't mind, the child won't remember, the child doesn't have the right to object.
Yep. All
Like,
those.
like I've had some experience with it myself, and it's like I know that not every sexual assailant has the same motivation. But I think that the first step is, it's almost like children are dehumanized.
Yeah.
So it makes it that much easier to assault a child.
I agree. Definitely.
And another layer to that is, it makes it that much easier for a parent to decide to have their child circumcised. If they're not viewing that baby as a person, they're not viewing that baby as an individual, they're viewing their baby as property to do with what they please.
Yeah.
And I know it triggers a lot of people for circumcision to be mentioned in the same conversation as pedophilia.
It does.
But these are the hard conversations that we have to have as a society. We can't ignore it. If we're as people actively against pedophilia, we've got to look at everything. And I think that the dehumanization is part of it. And
definitely, totally agree on that.
And you can see how circumcision is closely interwoven with that dehumanization and property thinking.
Yeah, same thing with FGM. You watch enough FGM videos or documentaries, and there's a whole, you can go to YouTube and look up a playlist by Cliteria Nipples. Has a whole bunch of them out there, and it's the same thing over there. They're treating their daughters like property, and the thinking is that they're gonna sell their daughters to get goats or chickens and who knows what. They're like meat. They're being traded, and in order to be able to sell them, they have to get them fixed.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. I think I was going to share with you. You were talking about how similar roots about control and stuff like that. I worked with my son, who is a bit of an artist. We drew out a weed. Looks kind of like a dandelion, but it's not meant to be a dandelion. That has 3 leaves: FGM, or female circumcision, in the center, intersex normalization, and on the other side, it's male circumcision. And then you look at the roots, and it's all the same roots, right? It comes down to control and economic stuff like that. And the whole idea, the reason why this came to my mind to have this weed growing up is a lot of people want to just end FGM, but they're not tackling the rest of the weed. So they're just like pulling out one leaf and then it grows back. We have to dig this up from the roots and eradicate it altogether.
Right. I think I don't know. I think it's quite a radical idea that all genital mutilation might someday end. It's just that it's been practiced for so long that it's just so deeply ingrained into cultures.
Yeah.
But I think that in cultures where no genital mutilation is practiced, or at least very little, like a European culture, female genital mutilation is certainly not acceptable. Almost no males are mutilated. I'm not really sure how intersex children are treated in Europe, but I would almost think that it would be less common to get like a sex normalization surgery over there.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like in an area where one is prevalent, it's almost like the others are more acceptable. Except America, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes so deep. You can study this for days on end and not get to the end.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I forgot earlier I was talking to you about the layers of cognitive dissonance with this movement and comparing it to other movements. So you got like 4 layers or whatever for an individual to peel away to get through their cognitive dissonance to see that this is bad. Well, if you looked at like slavery, for example, I think about the only cognitive dissonance that you have to deal with is, well, I own slaves, right? And get past that, and okay, I guess it's bad. We're now seeing, these people instead of as slaves, as individuals. And and to your point about babies being individuals, Brendan Marotta, the guy that put together the American Circumcision documentary. Did you ever watch that?
I did.
Okay. So how at the beginning he shows the baby, right? And he kind of draws it out in a way where the person that's watching it kind of develops a little bit of a relationship with the baby. They have feelings for that baby. They feel good about that person. But then there's like, especially those of us that know that this is bad, are like, oh crap, that baby's gonna get cut. Right. So yeah, he goes down the line, and he's it's a little bit manipulative, but it's genius. You go down the line, it's like, okay, then he cuts out, and we're not cutting the baby yet. We're learning about this topic, right? And you start learning and learning and learning. And it's like, maybe this isn't a good thing. And then you see the baby getting cut.
I saw it on Netflix. So they didn't show it, I don't think.
They blurred out that part. Yeah, I guess you can see the whole thing on Vimeo. Not blurred out, not censored as much. So.
Right. I'm not going to purposely go seek it out, but
yeah, no, I understand for sure. But if someone wants to, there's other videos you can find on YouTube. But if you want to see, how it's done, or how this one doctor did it, and it seems like there's several ways to do it. You could go see that part and see how he reaches down there and takes care of the frenulum. Yeah. So that actually kind of leads on to the next thing here about the doctor-patient relationships. I personally could not have a doctor that did this or promoted this or supported this. As far as I'm concerned, if you're okay with violating the Hippocratic Oath in that area, what are you okay with when taking care of me?
Right. That makes sense.
Challenge is finding pediatricians that are anti-circumcision or pro-genital autonomy. So, but your whole baby has a list, right?
Yeah. It's pretty sparse for rural areas, though.
Yeah, I can imagine. But hey, if people are watching this, if you're in a rural area and you know of an intact friendly doctor, get them on your whole baby's list. And then the last, but definitely not the least, relationship issue is between friends and family. And I hear this all the time from fellow advocates for genital autonomy that when we try to talk to our friends or family or whatever, and they end up, blocking us or unfriending us or, cutting us off altogether, blocking our phone numbers, you
Yeah.
name it. They don't want to hear from us. So, unfortunately, that it tears apart relationships.
Right. I don't know. I think that for me personally, it hasn't really caused any serious issues
Really.
with family or friends or anything like that. Um it's more so the anxiety
Mhm.
of what possibly could happen. Just because it is such a sensitive topic,
Yeah.
um knowing that friends and family have done that to their children. Um so it's hard to tiptoe around it.
Hmm.
But I have a family member who started making personalized mugs with like resin and glitter and stuff, and
Cool.
I sent her some Your Whole Baby stickers to put on one, and I found out that she apparently is pro genital autonomy. So
Awesome.
I mean, it's not always something negative.
Mhm.
Sometimes somebody will say like, "Oh, I literally never questioned it before. That's interesting." Or sometimes somebody will say like, "Yeah, I always thought that was weird."
Yeah.
So it's not always dark and negative. I think sometimes we find out that there are more people that agree with us than we thought.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like things are turning around, and particularly in the U.S. And I hope that it continues to be that way, and we continue to find people that are supportive of, of the message.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe in the future, fewer family and friend relationships will be damaged. Okay, so the next major section is about FGM. We kind of already covered that when we were talking about pedophilia, and but my whole point of having it on this list is to try to cover how FGM and intersex and male MGM or male circumcision is all intertwined, right? At the root, it's all about trying to control sex, whether you're trying to um, whether it's anti-masturbation, from catalogs, or even trying to make the man closer to God by, focusing less on that part of himself, um,
Right.
or trying to make your child more male or more female to fit the binary, um, or making sure your daughter doesn't have sex before marriage so you can sell her.
One of the things that I've noticed too is uh, cleanliness and disease is something that's mentioned a lot in both FGM and male genital mutilation societies. A lot of them think that a woman who is uncut is dirty. She's more susceptible to disease, and she's smelly. And it seems like that's what Americans think of intact males.
Yep.
Pretty much cleanliness and disease.
Yep.
And we know that that's not true.
Yeah.
And even if it were true, that's something that a person should be able to decide the risks and benefits of.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone should have the right over like what happens to them medically.
For sure. Oh,
Given
if you even call it medically,
right,
I don't call it a medical treatment because it's not. There's no medical indication.
right. No, but what I mean is even if there was a medical indication, even if there was a benefit, I feel like a person should be able to decide if the benefits outweigh the risks or not for themselves.
Yeah. As long as there's
So,
plenty of time for them to get to that point where they're old enough to understand.
of course.
Yeah, and that's why I say, we're talking about cosmetic surgeries here, definitely not
Right.
necessary surgeries. And yeah, I see this too, where the WHO or whoever says, well, there's no known medical benefits of female circumcision, but in fact, the reason why they use the word known, K-N-O-W-N, and for some reason, I caught this same statement other places where they cut out the word known.
Yeah.
But known is a very important piece. It's not known because they haven't actually done any studies to find out.
That's interesting.
Like, well, why not?
There's so many studies on male genital cutting. And do you want to know what I just realized? The American Academy of Pediatrics includes cultural benefits as a benefit. So
Yeah.
why don't they include cultural benefits for female genital cutting?
Yeah.
Because in a society where female genital cutting is prevalent, the cultural benefit is obviously there. I'm not saying that it's actually a benefit. It's
Yeah,
like
no.
a perceived benefit.
Yeah.
But of course they can't admit that.
Well,
They
the
can't.
AP even at one time tried to support female circumcision. It only
Right.
lasted for a
The
couple
ritual
months.
nick.
Yeah. Yeah. And people threw a fit about that, so they withdrew that. But yeah, anyways, it's clear that they're very inconsistent on it.
Right.
So.
I also think it's interesting that they didn't update their stance on circumcision.
Since 2012.
What's that?
Since the
Right.
2012 policy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They say that the benefits outweigh the risks for the parents who choose it. But then they later said that they're not fully aware of all the risks.
Mm-hmm.
So how could you possibly weigh the benefits and the risks if the risks are not known? Wouldn't they add that to the statement?
Exactly. And Georgia and Chapin from Intact America calls them out on that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to contradict yourself later, but to realize that and then not update the statement.
Mm-hmm.
I do have to wonder when and if they're going to update their stance on circumcision.
They're probably scared to even consider it, but I don't know. But we'll see. We'll see. I keep tweeting them about it. So.
Right. They have to notice the protesters outside of their conferences.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep, for sure. Yeah. In fact, recently, myself as well as 6-7 other people protested at the hospital where Andrew Friedman works in LA. So I don't know.
Okay.
I came across one medical professional as he was walking across the street and said, "Hey, do you know Andrew Friedman?" Like, yeah. Like, well, let him know we said hi. Like, okay.
Funny.
Yeah, funny.
Now, I haven't had the pleasure of going to a protest yet.
All right. Well, You might have to travel outside of your rural town a little bit to get to one, right? Yeah.
The bloodstained men have protested near me, but over an hour away.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you were talking about how the cultures that cut females are often saying, the females are cleaner for it and all that. I often wonder the connection between the term cleaner. Is it really physically cleaner, or is it cleaner in the eyes of God? Like a symbolic cleaner instead of physically cleaner.
Well, one example that I think of is Malaysia. I think it's Malaysia, where female genital cutting is very prevalent, and it's actually medicalized, where baby girls go into a hospital or clinic and their clitoral hood is removed. I'm not sure that actually has a religious component.
I don't know where it comes from.
But I know what you mean. Like even if it's not religious, it could be metaphorical.
Exactly.
Like clean, like as in like I don't know, but I get what you're saying.
Maybe you're cleaner in spirit or something somehow,
Yeah.
because I don't know. I don't know where that some of these ideas come from. So it is what it is. But again, the whole point is that it's all the same excuses across the board, and there's everywhere that they perform female circumcision, male circumcision also exists. And I kind of find it kind of funny. Brian Earp calls this out too. It's like everywhere that female circumcision occurs, male circumcision occurs. So you can't say that's an inequality thing. Like,
right.
How is that? Because in fact, the females might have started getting circumcised because the males were getting circumcised, and maybe the females also wanted to be closer to God or whatever. They wanted to be included in the, and all the fun, whatever. So, they started circumcising them too in order to give them all the religious benefits. So if we're going to end it, we kind of have to end it all together. We have to say, okay, enough of the economic excuses, enough of the control excuses.
Right.
All of it.
Let's just stop cutting infants and children.
Children, period. If you grow up and you're 18 or whatever, or I don't know, whatever you want to draw the line at, consent, and you want to get something customized down there, and you want to get tattoos, you want to get piercings anywhere, have at it. Yeah. you are an individual. You get to choose.
I think that it makes much more sense for it to be something that would happen as an adult, to me, simply because babies, Tylenol isn't even supposed to be used under the age of 2 or 4 months, let alone narcotics. If a full-grown man chooses to have his penis operated on, he can at least have access to Tylenol, Advil, Percocet, like
the real strong stuff,
yeah,
the opioids or whatever, if they really want to.
Narcotic options. You can't give a newborn baby narcotics. So it's it just doesn't.
It blows me away that people think that it's better as a child because less complications, whatever. It's like, hello, the inner mucosa is attached to the glands as a child. At least when they're adults, most likely that's separated already, so they don't have to tear that part apart.
Well, no, they say that there's less complications, but there's no way for us to know that.
Nope.
There's no system tracking complications, and studies that are done on complications are pretty ambiguous on what they consider a complication.
Yeah.
And not only that, a baby can't tell you about a complication. It's
Yeah, and a lot of the complications don't show up until the person
Right,
starts having sex later on in life.
right.
So,
Like keratinization of the glands happens in almost all cases,
mhm,
and that's complication enough for me to say every circumcision has complications.
yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so that's the relationship with FGM and intersex. So the last section is about social productivity. We have to wrap this up for you so you can bed, huh?
Yeah.
So the first thought about social productivity is like, okay, if the moils and the butchers, the doctors, surgeons, whoever that's performing these or doing something instead of spending the time doing that, what could they be doing? Maybe they'd be curing cancer or fixing this COVID problem or something, right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, and then there's people like you and I that are spending our time trying to spread the information and getting into debates with people and all that, spending hours and hours and hours every day trying to deal with this issue instead of spending more time with our kids or um, growing food, building houses, or whatever, addressing the other issues in the world.
Right. I think that the way I see it is there are a lot of problems in the world. And wouldn't it be nice if this was one problem that nobody had to put any energy into?
Nice.
I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. I'd much rather be, building houses or delivering food to people.
Right.
For sure.
I don't know.
But I
I think
imagine,
that, oh, sorry.
I imagine, like me, it's like, you know, you, your conscience drives you to share this information.
Right. I feel morally obligated
Mhm,
to inform people. And it's almost like I wish I didn't, just
mhm,
because when I get news that somebody is expecting, or when somebody shares that they found out that they're having a boy, I wish that I didn't feel obligated to share information with them,
yeah,
because it feels like, I don't want to say it's a responsibility, but it feels like it's something that I think that parent should consider or
yeah,
know that, hey, this, like, there are other options.
mhm,
Like, this isn't something that has to be done. Um,
yeah,
but like, just feeling that obligation,
mhm.
it's like it's stressful.
It
I wish
is.
I could just be happy for
Mhm.
people when they announce a pregnancy, instead of
Me
saying,
too.
oh, I hope it's a girl.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um,
As long as, especially, yeah, as long as it's someone from a culture that doesn't cut girls. I mean,
right.
there's cases where people that have come to the USA from other cultures, and they will take their daughter across overseas or whatever to get their daughter cut, or
Ugh,
might be from the Dawidi Bora tribe or
that's
whatever.
just horrible.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, lady in Texas recently got indicted for doing that. So. But you're familiar with your whole baby, so you're probably familiar with the incognito option, right?
Right.
Yeah. So for those of
There
you,
there are some barriers to that. In order to have like an incognito pack sent to somebody, you do have to have their address.
yeah,
And even if you say, if you want to have your whole baby reach out to somebody and message them, the person could say, that's weird, like, I wonder who tipped them off, and then they could go and see who they know follows this page, or who they know likes this
y-
page.
I when my wife was pregnant, I don't know where the information, how the information got there, but we always got plenty of information in the mail about breast milk options and diapers, and we got plenty of advertising. So it'd be cool if I could figure out how to get a hold of one of those lists. and hand them
Yeah.
over to your whole baby and say, hey, let's mail some incognito stuff to all these people that are having babies right now.
Right.
But yeah, there's definitely, lists out there. There's mailing lists that people, companies buy. So
Right.
yeah.
It's just that if you like have an acquaintance that you know is expecting a boy, sometimes you might not have their address.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I understand.
that would prevent you from being able to mail something to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, even with anonymous options, it's not always feasible.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Well, that's the end of the list, Kristin. Unless you have any other thoughts or ideas you would like to share with people.
I don't think so.
I
Sorry.
do remember one thing I was going to share with you. In my what got me started in speaking out loud publicly is one thought. In 15, 16, 17 years from now, chances are I'll come across someone that's born today that's mad that they were cut. And if they know that I knew that it was bad, they're going to ask me, what were you doing to help protect me? And
Right.
I want to have an answer. A good one.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like one of the things that I wanted to mention was in regards to like activist burnout.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I used to do was leave cards places, or Your Whole Baby has sticky notes now
Mm-hmm.
with some facts on them that you can just stick up, so you don't have to worry about a sticker permanently damaging something.
Mm-hmm.
And even doing that has got exhausting. Like
Right.
pumping gas, I would stick a card into the card reader.
Yeah, that's a common one.
It's just the thought of, will whoever sees this care,
Mm-hmm.
is heavy, just because I just go right to imagining that they're going to be like, oh, this is lame, and just throw it away.
Yeah, maybe.
I know that leaving cards around, somebody might see it and be like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe they might not realize it right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but it plants that initial seed.
Mm-hmm.
It gets gears turning. It brings a little bit of awareness.
Yeah, we have no idea where down the line what we do today will impact someone.
Right. It's just so hard
I hear
to
you.
keep going.
I hear you. Yeah, I remember protesting one time, and this car pulled up next to me, and I'm standing there with the bloodstained pants and everything, holding a sign, and there's these 3 young girls, I don't know, probably 8, 9, 10 years old. I'm thinking probably closer to 10. And they were looking at me, and they were definitely, I made eye contact, and they definitely noticed me and all that. They weren't there for too long, but my thought was, 7, 8 years from now or so, they might have a baby, and they're gonna remember this, and
Right.
it's going to key them off to at least ask the questions,
Right.
Not just automatically accept what society has been doing and what doctors might tell them or whatever.
Right. I tabled at an event near Philadelphia, and it was quite a bit of a mixed reaction when people would see the booth.
Mm-hmm.
But there was quite a few people that were perceptive to information.
Yeah.
But then there were the people who were like,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I'm Jewish, so don't talk to me.
Yeah. I don't know if we had any Jewish folk,
Yeah. No.
but
Yeah.
there were some people that just turned their nose up and walked away after making a dirty face.
Yep. I ran into plenty of those, but It's kind of like sales. I don't know if you've ever done sales, but it's like
Yeah.
when you're making cold calls or whatever for sales, you have to keep your expectations down here. Like you might
Right.
get 1 out of 10 that actually respond at all to you. And hey, that's work that you have to go through. You have to go through 10 calls to get one possible lead or whatever.
Right.
But when it comes to this, that one makes it totally worth it. Right.
Right.
You might have been the person that informed my wife, and you might have gone through 10 others that turned their nose up at you or said you're crazy or whatever. But you saved my children. And I'm a dad of 2 teenage boys. That was over 15 years ago. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving us that information. It means the world to me. I often refer to what Jesus said, what you do for the least of these, you do for me. That means so much to me. Because that's how I feel when I see genital autonomy advocates speaking out to protect children. It feels like they're protecting me, even though I got cut. It feels like they're speaking for me.
They're still speaking out.
Yeah.
Like for baby boys.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It warms my heart. So thank you for what you have been doing for your whole baby. Thank you for the tabling that you've done. It really does mean a lot. Okay. So I'll let you go so you get some sleep.
Okay. Yeah, it's 1 a.m. here now.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, you're on East Coast time.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Kristin. Thank you again for doing this interview and sharing
All right.
your
Thank
thoughts.
you for having me.
Bet. All right. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye.